Randy talks about how he was living in LA with his family. He's a criminal defense attorney. He deals with appeals and people post-conviction type cases. Mm-hmm. And he was very successful, really, really successful, the way he explained it. And then they moved to Atlanta and a lot of things shifted in his life. And he came to realize that he was really absorbed in his ego. And he explains it so beautifully. He realized that he needed to take a look at himself and that he was in a lot of pain. And so then that's when he decided, and I'm really shrinking all of this, but he decided to get into a 12-step group, and that really had him dive into his spirituality and himself. But he talks a lot about just the pain he was feeling and how he had to really take a look at himself. And one thing that really struck me was how he was saying how in LA, he was really well known and he was on different TV shows, you know, how you see attorneys as analysts on shows, or he would be written up. And he said he remembered looking at himself in the mirror and saying, wow, you know, you've really arrived. And, and when he said it, I thought, well, what's wrong with that? But he was saying that he was coming from a real superficial point of view, you know, and that his wife had told him that he was spending less and less time with the family and she didn't know if their marriage was going to survive. And then she got a job in Atlanta and he knew that it was important for, you know, him to agree to move and that his family was important to him. And right away, he didn't find as much professionally, you know, the opportunities that he expected to find. And it just slowed him down and, you know, caused him to sit down and pause. And it's just it's a very powerful episode that really gets into the kind of things that I love to talk about. And he talks about pain. He brings that up over and over again, just like this feeling inside. He wasn't feeling right and just wanting to deal with that. And, you know, he did. And so that's what I like to talk about because, you know, it gets to what so many people walk around feeling, you know, every day. And then it gets to the healing part of it as well.
Yeah. I think getting into Al-Anon, going to that first Al-Anon meeting, and all of a sudden being introduced to this idea of a higher power, a God of my understanding, foreign to me, but I was in such pain, I was willing to even entertain the idea. And I think that's where my spiritual journey really started.
And that had to be perfect in a way because it wasn't trying to push anything on you, any real ideology, right?
So that's exactly right. I would have resisted any dogmatic ideology. Frankly, I would have resisted just any idea of God or a higher power unless the circumstances of my life forced me to it. In a way, I've heard AA speakers and Al-Anon speakers talk about alcoholism being a blessing, because what is a blessing except for something that leads you back to God, where you came? So in a way, the fact that I had some alcoholism in my family and the fact that I had hit this strange bottom was such a blessing for me, because it just led me in a whole new direction that there's no way I would have done myself.
I'm wondering about that first day. Like, did you feel just some relief? Did something sort of just make you relax as you were listening to people, or do you remember what it felt like?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, and that's an interesting question, because a lot of people will come into that first meeting, they'll hear the exact thing they needed to hear. See, I got into Al-Anon because I figured, well, I know 12 steps, they talk about God and a higher power, so I need to find a way to get this, whatever this God, higher power is, to get me my career back to the way it's supposed to, like to get everything back to the way it was. So all of a sudden I get to that first meeting and they're talking about letting go. They're talking about surrendering even more.
You're like, what the what?
I'm like, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to sort of, like, to the extent I'm even willing to believe in a God, I want that God to be kind of like my genie, you know, who's going to sort of just get everything back. And I'm not hearing that.
Oh my goodness. So what were you doing in LA?
So, yeah, for my profession, so I am by profession a criminal defense attorney. I do post-conviction work, so I help people who have already been convicted of crimes try to appeal their convictions or to try to get out. You know what? I'd started my own practice. You know, I was doing really well. I was on the top of the world. I did a lot of news. I was on national news programs.
Yeah.
I had the respect of my colleagues. I was getting written up in like the top lawyers in LA Magazine. I mean, this was the height of my ego. In fact, you know, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but about a month before we moved to Atlanta and I hit that bottom, I remember looking in the mirror. This was the height of the ego. And I remember looking at him and being like, yeah, man, you have arrived. Like you are, Rainey, you are at the top of your game. And as they say, pride cometh before a fall, you know?
And I'm like, what's wrong with saying that? But you weren't in the right place when you were saying
it. It was all just, it was all external. That's the thing. It was like all of my self-worth and any kind of love I could feel for myself. And I didn't realize this at the time. It was all outside of me. There was nothing. I was empty inside. And so my happiness and my well-being and serenity, if you even want to use that, was all dependent on how many people were giving me attention, how many people were liking me. Oh, did I win this case? Oh, I can feel good about myself. Oh, I lost this case. I can't feel good about myself. Oh, I just got an award. Now I can feel good about myself. And so everything was external.
So if you don't mind my asking, how did that affect your family life?
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially people who are like very successful from a professional standpoint. Even most recently, like Tom Brady, you know, you saw all of this success and then it's like his home life started to crumble, you know, respectfully speaking, it started to crumble. And a lot of times I think that's where things get tricky for people. So whenever somebody can come up out of that, it's very powerful because so many people relate to that, men and women. You know, if you're in a professional aspect, you sacrifice so much, whether it's love or time with your family, your kids, or whoever you may love. And people come and go, and then you look back at your life and you thought you were doing well. Like when he said, when he looked in the mirror and said, I arrived. You know, that was speaking specifically to that one goal that he had.
Right.
But little did he know it was so many things on the inside that he would have to work on or confront. So
that's so
very,
true.
very deep.